Hi there, welcome to Still Learning, the space where we celebrate growth in all its messy, beautiful, and raw forms. I'm your host, Fortune Fowley, and if you're here, you're right where you need to be because here we're embracing the beauty of being works in progress. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about investment, more specifically the question, am I a good investment? I know that might be an unusual question, but in today's conversation, I want to dive into what that question entails and how it guides you to begin to reflect on what it really means to be a good investment in the eyes of God, for yourself, and for others. Hi guys, happy Still Learning Monday. I hope you're having a good morning. I hope your morning, your week is off to a great start. I hope you're doing well. In today's conversation, I'm really excited to kind of dive into our topic, and it's definitely something that might require you guys to have an open mind because it's definitely a concept that when I first thought of it was a little bit hesitant to be open to, but as we walk it out in this conversation today, I definitely think you guys are going to have a whole new perspective and outlook on this particular concept. And that would be viewing yourself or asking yourself, am I a good investment? This idea of viewing yourself as an investment, but also in relations to God being an investor. And so I know that when we typically hear the word investment, we can think about it in regards to stocks, money, and businesses. But what if we think about it in terms of how God invests in us and how we are stewards and how can we steward what God has invested in us and how can we be good investments, right? Because when you really think about what it means to invest, it just means that someone's putting something valuable into, right? They're pouring into something valuable in hopes of getting a return. And so with that being said, it really brought into mind kind of this idea of what if God is an investor? And I can't take full credit for this because this is definitely something that came about to me a couple years ago when my church was hosting a morning discussion. It was kind of like a workshop that they were having that weekend, and it was a financial workshop. So very practical. We were talking about money, saving, stewardship, all the things. And at some point, they had us break out into small groups to talk and reflect. And at this point in time, guys, I was still pretty new to my church. And so I was still getting to know people. I was definitely shy. And, I wasn't going to be the person who was going to volunteer and grab the mic and share. But I remember while we were in our small groups, and then when it was time to return to the larger group, the Holy Spirit really nudged me to speak up and to share what I discussed in my small group when we came back together. And it definitely wasn't something I planned. It was something I was really nervous about because, again, guys, I was feeling a bit shy. And I was like, I'm just going to say, I'm going to listen to you, Lord. And I'll never forget it. I opened my mouth, and what came out of it was, if God is an investor, then I have to ask myself, am I a good investment? And that was just what I said, guys. I threw that question out into the larger group, and it really was something that I had in mind because the conversation that we were having in our small groups is like, okay, like viewing God as an investor, right? But no one really thought of it, and personally I did, and I feel like that's just kind of like how my mind works. But I was like, okay, if God is an investor, then does that make me the investment? And if I am the investment, then am I a good investment? Am I something that God can invest in and entrust what he's pouring into to bring about this great and marvelous return? And so that's what I threw out there, just abiding by the Spirit. And I wasn't trying to be deep. I wasn't trying to be this biblical scholar, philosopher. Like, I really wasn't. I was just sharing what was on my heart. And after that, people started coming up to me. They definitely started to know my name from there because I want to be like introduced to people later on. They're like, oh no, I remember you. You were the one who said that one thing about being a good investment. And so it definitely left a mark for me in regards to my church. But it was like just a moment that honestly, I wasn't trying to make a statement. And it's funny to think about it now because I haven't really thought about it much since then until recently, guys. And it's really because as I've been working on this podcast and really just asking God what kind of conversations he wants me to bring forth here and how he wants me to use this platform, because again, it's for his glory. But generally, what does he want me to share with you guys and talk about? And one of the things that he brought back to my remembrance is that moment. And so it's really what's led me to have this conversation today with you guys about being a good investment, because I think some of us have to be reminded today that we are a good investment. And so what does that look like, and how do we walk that out in our day-to-day life? I think for so long, I only really viewed the term and the terminology of investment and investor through a worldly lens and really through like a financial, corporate, business bro lens, to be quite honest with you guys. But after that conversation that day, it really did shift my perspective, and it made me begin to see myself a little bit differently or in a new light. because the truth is God is an investor. He has invested in you and in me. He is invested in our hearts and our dreams and our growth and our future. And his investment is also not because we proved ourselves to be like this amazing investment. And it's not because we earned it either, but it's because he decided that we are worth it. Like, it's in his nature to plant seeds, to pour out, to cultivate, to care, and to tend to what he loves. And he loves us. So he invests in us. He pours into us. And just sitting with that, right? Remembering that is really important, because I know that sometimes like I look at the ways I've fallen short, the ways I've messed up and had failures, and my insecurities in the areas where, I might feel like I should be further along, and wonder, like, God, how are you entrusting this to me? Like, why are you pouring this out into me, Lord? Like, I really don't deserve it. But whether I deserve it or not, or earned it or not, really doesn't matter to God, because of God's character. And that's something that we have to remember. Because of God's character, he doesn't invest like people invest. People, we invest expecting to see a quick return, a good return, and people pull out when we feel like we're not getting back what we're giving out. But God, he invests from a place of just eternal love and grace for us, and from a place of knowing our full story from beginning to end. He really invests with such an assurance, a confidence, a faithfulness in the things that he placed within us, and that they will manifest, that they will come to fruition within our lives, because that is how he designed it and created it to be. And he has given us everything we need to have such a great return and to produce such wonderful things from the things that he's invested within us. His spirit dwells within us. That is a gift that Jesus gave to us. Like, I can go on and on about the ways that God invests and pours into us from this place that's so full and enriching, and it just encompasses so much love for us. And even just thinking about how in John 3:16 it tells us that he gave us his only begotten son. That was the cost. That was his investment. Like, I don't know anyone else who would invest their child into us, but like, God did that, and he didn't do it casually. He didn't make this investment on the whim. From the very beginning, he's been invested in us, and he makes it known that even when we stumble, even when we mess up, even knowing that there will be days when we question if we're even worth the effort, or if we even want to do this anymore, like knowing that sometimes we will waste the very things he has given to us. He still gave, he still invested, he still poured in. And I want to pause there, because I don't want us to miss this, like how God's investment in you and me and us is not dependent on our performance. He didn't wait for us to get it all together before he called us worthy. He didn't wait for us to show a return before he decided to plant something in us. Like, he invested in us because he saw our value before we even knew we had value. Before we can even conceptualize, even understand our worth, he already saw it and deemed it worthy to invest in and pour into, to give everything he has. Like, the Lord doesn't withhold good things from us. He literally pours everything he has into us. And so if you're ever asking yourself, are you a good investment? You don't have to look any further, because simply the cross, literally the cross, is God's answer to that. And it's that you are worth it. And that is kind of like the foundational parts of this conversation, I guess you could say groundwork, that I want to lay down for us guys before we even dive deeper into this concept of God being an investor and us being a good investment. I think it's really important that we first understand who God is as an investor. What does that look like? Which I just went on to talk about, how he just invests in us in a different way, not like how we think of investment or how human beings invest. Remember, like, he's not like man, like his ways are not like our ways, his thoughts are not like ours. And so the way God invests in us and pours into us is not dependent on our performance or anything of that, or us earning it or deserving it, or because someone else vouched for us. The Lord vouched for us before anyone was even willing to do it for us. The Lord is just willing to take risks on us and invest in us and give us everything. And for him, it's just worth it because he loves us so deeply. And understanding that his love is what makes us a good investment, and his purpose, and the fact that he is so intentional with us and handcrafted, and his hand is in everything that we do, and all that he gives unto us, his mercy, his compassion, all of that is what makes us good investments. And so remembering that and knowing that it's nothing that you did, but everything about who he is and his character. I think that's really important to kind of help us first really grasp and hold on to this idea and walk this out in this conversation. And so in saying that we are good investments because God has called us that, we have to ask ourselves, how are we being good investments, right? Like, how are we stewarding that? And it really boils down to like really viewing yourself kind of like as something that God invests into and being an investment. And when you do, I definitely think it causes you to start like thinking about how a lot of us know how to pray for breakthrough and how to pray for blessings and this, that, and the third, but we really don't know how to invest in ourselves the way God called us to. Like, we really aren't walking out what it means to be a good investment in that way. And sometimes we find ourselves waiting for people to pour into us, waiting for the opportunities to fall into our laps. So we're not really stewarding what He's already given us. And in saying that, I'm definitely not talking about in like a self-help or hustle culture mindset that I feel like is really imposed on us in this day and age, but I'm talking about like intentional stewardship, because really that's what it means to be a good investment. You know, God invests in us because He trusts that we will steward the things He has given us well. It's about stewardship and being intentional in our stewardship, about cultivating our skills and nourishing our spirit, taking care of our body, managing our finances well, and setting boundaries in a way that multiplies what God has planted within us, because God's investment in us deserves our participation. Being a good investment requires participation. There are seasons where I wanted God to open doors for me, but I wasn't preparing at all for those rooms that He was going to open. Like, I wanted people to pour into me, but I wasn't pouring into myself. Like, I wanted blessings, but I wasn't stewarding what I already had. And when you really think about it, you can't give what you don't have. You can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're not taking that time to invest in yourself and to steward the things that God has given you well and placed inside you well, so that when you are pouring out, it's not coming from a place of emptiness, like, that is really important. And that's, again, tying back to being intentional with our stewardship. With my stewardship, it wasn't because I didn't think I was worthy of that investment in that time, and that God didn't deserve that, and I wasn't willing to be a participant in that, but it's because I never even viewed myself like this, right? In the lens of an investment. As I said before, I really thought of it in this worldly concept, in this very finance bro way. And I don't do finance, I do healthcare. But like, very much in that regard. And so I didn't realize that God wasn't just giving to me, He was investing in me. Like, God is investing in me. Wow. Like, it's really crazy to think about, but God is investing in me. And when I start seeing myself that way, it really did do some perspective shifting around, because if God thought that I was worth it and that I am worthy to be invested in, that I am a good investment, who am I to say otherwise? And I think one of the reasons why I really struggled with viewing myself in that way and wrestling with that is because I didn't know yet the difference between being a good investment versus being someone who receives God's generosity. Because there is a difference. It's one thing to receive God's goodness, His grace, His favor, and don't get me wrong, those are gifts and we can't earn them and we don't deserve them, and we thank the Lord for them. But there are also gifts He has given us that are not just for us, right? And I honestly think majority of what God has given us is not just for us, but it's also about us stewarding what He's given us and being a good investment for God. Because being a good investment means, what do you do with what He gives you? Again, tying back to intentional stewardship, because just receiving, it's not enough. Receiving is passive. Receiving His gifts is an act of passivity, but to be a good investment, it requires you to be active. God's investment requires your participation. It deserves it. And God's generosity, it flows no matter what, which we're so grateful for. He's so good for that. That is who He is, but not all the time do we choose to do something with what He's given unto us. Like, if we're meant to reflect Christ, we're meant to reflect the Lord, and He is generous, that means we also have to be generous too. So with the things that He has given us in His generosity, we're also meant to take the things He has given us and give those in generosity. Replicate that, reflect who He is to others. And sometimes we can just stay in this posture and be like, thank you, God. And that is important. We should always have like posture of gratitude and just giving glory to God for all the amazing things He's given us. But there is another part to that where it's, okay, now what can I do with what You've given me? Like, I don't want to just be someone who loves the blessings, to answer prayers, to open doors, though I do. I don't just want to be that person. I want to be the person who's like, how can I multiply this for Your glory? And to take it even a step further, because it doesn't stop there. Like I said, like, oftentimes the gifts God has given us is really not just for ourselves. It's not stopping at us, but it's for others too. Because the truth is, we're not just called to be an investment. We're called to be a good investment, and not just to God, but to others. And then this is the part I feel like we don't even talk about enough, which is that, what does it mean to be someone that others can pour into? Someone who doesn't just take take and consume, but who multiplies with being given. Like, I think about people who invest in wedding planners. You are entrusting the idea and the concepts and the Pinterest board that you are giving to this wedding planner, that they're going to take what you've invested in them, take the money, the budget that you have given them, and they are going to be able to multiply that and create this dream wedding for you. Like, you are entrusting that within them because you believe that this wedding planner is worth the investment, because they're going to be able to accomplish greater than what you even imagine or perceive. And so I really think that's important to keep in mind in regards to us being a good investment for others. And if we're being real, even in the world, people don't invest in just anything. God doesn't invest like people do. But when it comes to being investments, good investments for people, we have to take that into consideration, which is that people don't just invest in anything. When we think about investors look at the condition of something before they put their money, time, or energy into it. They ask questions like, is this going to grow? Is this sustainable? Will there be a return? And nobody wants to invest in something that's going to drain them, or anything that's going to just sit stagnant and not produce anything. And so in that same way, the people around you, the mentors, the friends, the community that God has placed in your life, they're sowing into you with their time, with their care, with their love, with their wisdom. And the question is, what are you doing with what's being poured into you? Because being a good investment isn't just about being loved well, it's about being someone who can receive that love, that wisdom, that care, and multiply it, bring it to a point of abundance. Like, it doesn't just stop at you, right? Let's bring it to a point of overflow where it is outsourced from you. Like, be someone where, and I say this a lot, I want my money to make money for me, but really it's like that. Like, being a good investment is like, if God is investing joy in us, I want my joy to make joy for not just me, but for others, like in that sense, right? And it's just not about consuming generosity, but cultivating it. It's about recognizing that when people, or when God himself pours into you, they're not doing it so you can just sit with it. They're doing it so you can grow, bear fruit, and give back. Therefore, what are you giving back? Because the reality is that investment comes with the expectation of return. Like, at some point, there will be a return on the investment. And I'm not saying this in a way that is transactional, what can you do for me kind of way, but in the sense that God has created us to grow, to evolve, and to bear fruit. The Bible literally tells us in John 15 that we are called to bear much fruit. And when we allow God's investment to work in us, when we invest in ourselves the way he's called us to, and when we show up as a good investment in our relationships and to others, the return is multiplication. But what are you multiplying, right? Because I'm trying to multiply good things, not bad things. And all of that is determined by the way you invest, right? The way you invest determines the type of return you receive. It's not enough to just acknowledge the seeds God has placed in you, but what you do with it matters. The kind of soil, because there's good and bad soil, right? There's soil that is unable to actually produce good fruit. So the kind of soil you plant into matters. And the fact that God even invests in us, it's him being like, I'm investing in good soil. So we are meant to also do the same with the things he has given us. How you water it, how you protect it, how you nurture it, all of that impacts the harvest. With that being said, it really made me think about that parable with the 3 servants in Matthew 25, the parable of talents, or the parable of gold, whichever one you call it. But a brief synopsis of this parable is that there was a master and he entrusted each servant with a portion of his wealth. And let's pause there, because investment requires trust. The fact that God is even investing such good things within us and trusting us with, whether it's that business, whether it's that relationship, whether it's that house, right? Whether it's that car, he's entrusting us with those things to steward it well. Like, that's a testament of his trust in us, his faith in us. And like, that's just so beautiful. And it's like, oh my gosh, God, I don't want to let you down. Like, thank you for trusting me. The master, going back to the parable, he gave one of the servants 5 talents. He gave another one 2 talents, and then he gave another one 1 talent. So there's 3 servants in total. What happened was, because when we're trying to say the Bible is interesting, let me say something. The Bible got everything, okay? Romance, drama, thriller, horror, it got everything in there. But the ones who received 5 talents and 2 talents, they actually went and multiplied what was given to them. They stewarded it well. They didn't just sit on it. They worked it, cultivated it, invested it, and produced a return. They didn't just sit on that. But the one who received 1 talent, you know what he did? He buried it. He didn't even try. And when the master returned, and he called all his servants to basically present what they had done with what he has given them, the one who had 5 talents and 2 talents, they show that they multiplied it. I believe the one who, and I could be wrong, but again, read your Bible, correct me. I'm pretty sure the one who had 5 talents, he multiplied it to like 10 talents, and the one who received 2 talents multiplied it to like 4 talents. And so because of that, because they steward what was given to them so well, and they really showed to the master that they were good investments, more was added to them. Like the master was able to trust them with even more talent, was even able to trust them with bigger things, right? If you prove yourself worthy to be a good steward over the small things, then the Lord can even trust you with greater things, right? But the one servant who buried it, and when it was time for him to present his return and he had nothing, his master called him wicked and lazy because he didn't even attempt to steward what had been entrusted to him. Like the master even said, it would have been better for you to go and put it in like a bank and get a loan. So at least interest been adding up to it. At least there would have been a little bit of something, but you didn't even do that. And so really this parable, I feel like it makes it very clear to us that God is looking for a return, and not because he's transactional, but because he's a God of growth, fruitfulness, and multiplication. And there is an expectation for us to do the same. He has entrusted us, each of us, with something, whether it's a gift, an opportunity, a relationship, influence, wisdom, and what we do with it matters. And we want to make sure that the return that we get on this is one that is good, right? One that glorifies and honors the trust that he put in us. And then even thinking of that parable even further, and even more what I gained from that parable was how, the master was generous with his investment and what he invested into the servant. That was the gift, but only 2 of them did something with it. The third buried it. He didn't misuse it. And I think that's where a lot of the times some of us catch ourselves, where we're like, well, I didn't misuse it. Like it's still one, but the things you also didn't steward it well because it wasn't multiplied. Actually wasted it. You didn't do anything with it. And that is just as bad as not even taking a chance, not even taking a risk. If you think about it, God is taking a risk on us, like the way he invests within us, giving us everything to our disposal, just so generously giving unto us. So what are we saying if we're not willing to like do the same with the things he's given to us? And so it's just really important to understand that and make sure that in being good investments, we are being intentional stewards over what he's given us. So that means being a good investment is about saying, God, I want to honor what you've given me. I want to take your generosity and respond with faithfulness. I don't just want to be a recipient of your grace. I want to be a reflection of it. And when you invest intentionally and faithfully in the things God has given you, the return isn't just for you. God doesn't just give us gifts for ourselves, but it's for his glory and it's for the good of others. No, it is so that we can be blessed to be a blessing to others. It's so that all the people who are connected to us are also blessed. It's so that we are able to show up in peace in our relationships, in our finances, in our healing, in our influence. All of that just reflects this goodness, his goodness, right, in our lives. And, at times I think we can minimize that. I know that I did when I didn't really necessarily view myself as something that God was investing in. And so when you don't really see that you are something God is investing into, we can often think like our yes doesn't really matter, or the seeds that God is planting within us are insignificant, when they are actually so significant. Like God continuously shows me, especially with this podcast, how he has been investing in this for years. Like he has been investing in this for years, and I had no idea. And that's just to say that you have no idea how your faithfulness today could produce a harvest tomorrow, and not just for you, but for the generations after you. And I think that's just really important to remember. It's important to really keep in mind, like, how are you investing what God has given you? Are you multiplying it, or are you bearing it out of fear, insecurity, laziness, or distraction? Therefore, in being a good investment, I want to make sure that the way I invest is going to have a good return. Because if you only give half of yourself, you'll only receive half of the return. If you're planting in bad soil, meaning toxic environments, unhealthy habits, disobedience, you can't expect this flourishing harvest. But when you plant in faith, when you invest in your spiritual life, in your mental health, in your physical health, when you show up and steward your gifts well, when you're intentional about the relationships and resources that has given you, and more importantly, when you are just seeking out the Lord first and cultivating and growing in your relationship with him and being in that secret place, the return will always multiply. God is a God of abundance, and he seeks to do that in our lives. And sometimes that return isn't immediate, but I really do pray and hope and in covering for all of us that the Lord gives us patience and endurance to be able to steward intentionally and faithfully and be good investments. Because any investor knows that if you're going to be an investor, if you're going to get an investing game, it is a long-term game, right? This is a long game. This is nothing short. It takes time, and sometimes they don't even see the return on what they invested in until 20 years later. So it's easy to go weary in your work and what you're doing, but I really do hope and pray for all of us, Lord, and just cover us, Lord, that you give us the renewal of our strength and hope and reassurance, and just trust that there will be a return from this, right? That assurance, and that it is worth the wait, and it will return in due season. And then even going beyond what return looks like in our lives, there is something even more important, the return we're giving to God. Because ultimately, I know that I want to be able to stand before him one day and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. I want to be able to say, hey God, like, hey Savior, I want to be like, God, look, I took what you gave me and I didn't waste it. I multiplied it. I honored it. I grew it. I invested it in others and I poured it back out. And I hope that's what you want to say too, and what you want to hear too. And if it is, I really do want to leave us with these questions today just to sit with, to reflect on. Those questions being, 1, do I believe God is invested in me? Do I believe that God is investing his time in me, his resources in me, his love in me? Because that is key. That is really key to believing and having faith that the Lord is investing with you with all that he has, because he loves you and he wants to. And he sees that you are a good investment and that you're worthy of it. You are worth investing into. You are worth it. The second question is, am I investing in myself in a way that honors what he's poured into me? Like, are we taking care of ourselves, our mental health, our emotional health, our well-being? Like, are we ensuring that we are capable and able to just be a good investment and steward what he's given us well? The third question is, am I being a good investment in the lives of those around me? Can people pour into me? Can people trust me? Can people see that when they pour their ideas into me, those ideas are brought to life in a way they have never seen before? And then lastly, what kind of return am I giving to God? Is the return that I'm giving to him one that glorifies and honors him, that is living out the very words that he's spoken for us, which is to multiply and to bear fruit and to be abundant and to fill the earth, to do these good works and to be a reflection of him to those around us? Because at the end of the day, I want all of us to understand and take away from this conversation, you are a good investment, not because of what you've done, not because of how perfect you are, but because God said so. He's already sown into you. He's already planted seeds of purpose, potential, grace, and goodness inside of you. And because you are a good investment, that also means something else. God is expecting a good return, not a return of perfection, but a return of partnership, a return of participation, a return of growth, and most importantly, a return of you becoming who he has created you to be and then pouring that back into the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Still Learning. I hope this conversation gave you clarity, encouragement, and reminded you that God has already declared you a good investment. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend. And if you're not already, make sure to follow @StillLearningPod on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue this conversation with you. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a rating or review. It helps others find this space and keeps the community growing. And as always, let me know how I can make this space better, because I'm still learning too. So remember, what it is now is not what it will always be or what it will become. Stay encouraged, stay rooted in truth, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Still Learning.